How is Twiga Food allowing African well, African policymakers to understand some of these challenges the smallholder farmers face?
Well, I think the key thing is that my co-founder Grant is also something that he's been very, very passionate about over the years, and we're starting to engage a lot more in conferences and forums talking about the challenge around food security in urban cities. Because, and I think this is the one piece that is kind of not very, very obvious, but the fact that you're actually having a lot of urbanization, and that urbanization is well ahead of a rate of growth of infrastructure. And what that is doing is that it's making last mile distribution more and more expensive over time. And the biggest commodity that actually relies on this last mile distribution is food. So in most African cities, you're seeing double-digit inflation on food. You're not seeing income levels growing in line with that. And what's happening is that it's just getting harder and harder to survive in African cities. So you'll get to a point where we start facing issues around food security in urban cities, not because food is not available, but because it's not affordable. And what starts happening on top of that is that as the price umbrella gets to certain levels, then you realize that it starts getting cheaper to import product. You know, today as we speak, most of the garlic is coming from China here in Kenya as a result of this price umbrella. I mean, in Nigeria, you know, tomato paste is coming from Europe, or rice is actually coming from Europe. I know Benin is one of the largest importers of rice in Africa, but a lot of that makes its way into Nigeria. So when you start taking all that into account, you'll start having a lot of importation of food into our markets, and whatever we call an agricultural industry on the continent will actually face imminent demise. And that's a sector that actually employs 50 to 60% of the population on the continent. So you have an issue around food security, you have an issue around sustaining agriculture. So the key thing is, how do you then solve all this? And I think the thing is that I also don't think that governments should try and figure this out, because what happens is that governments are not good in business. So the key thing is, I think they need to create an enabling environment for entrepreneurs to come and solve these problems in the various markets, because entrepreneurs are able to better deploy capital to figure out how to solve the problems on the ground. And then after that, they just need to tax everyone and provide the services that they need to provide.
So are you telling, like, for youths or anybody looking to invest in the sector, there are a lot of opportunities in the sector?
There's immense opportunities. I think the key thing is that solving some of these problems are multi-billion-dollar opportunities in the long term. And the key thing here is, it's not because I believe that every problem that you see is a solution waiting to happen. You know, and if you look at, for example, where we are today in Africa, where 44% of disposable income is going to food, you know, that's where the US was 150 years ago. 52% of their disposable income was going to food. So, and the key thing is that we saw that a lot of these changes actually happened in a generation through the Industrial Revolution. So the key thing is that what do we then need to do to revolutionize our agricultural sector to ensure that at least the cost of food comes down, and that starts spurring lots of other opportunities within the economy. So, and that's how we see it. For example, when we started out, we're just doing food distribution. Now we have so much data on retailers and what it is that they offer. So right now, we started partnering with banks who are connecting onto our mobile app, and retailers are able to get working capital financing for whatever it is that they're buying. And that's an offshoot of the work that we started doing on the food distribution. So what you find is that as you tackle the problem, it starts bringing on other opportunities, and those opportunities start driving the advancement of our society. Because previously I could not access capital as a retailer, but now I have somebody who brings the goods to me, and after that I get access to financing to build my business from a working capital standpoint. And in essence, I'm able to do things I could not do a few years ago. So, and I think that's more of what we need to see on the continent. How do governments and create that enabling environment for business to come and solve some of these problems.
So I wanted to go back to like your farmers again. For the payment, how does that work? Do you have to have, how does the payment strategy work with the farmers? How are you paying farmers?
So what happens is that, once the farmers supply goods at the collection center, then those goods are logged in as tied to that particular farmer. And then the goods then get to our distribution center in Nairobi. We validate the weights between the collection center and the supply point. And then immediately the farmer gets paid on mobile money.
Okay, so it's not like we have to wait for...
No, we pay our farmers within 24 hours of collecting their produce.
So have you had to do it? How do you do it? Is there, what's the market demand like? Have you ever had to do it like with harvest loss, shelf life issues?
We deal a lot with that because at times what you find is that at times there's issues around quality, there's issues around handling. But I think what we've done over time is to really fine-tune the system by leveraging the information that we're collecting from the retail to then organize our procurement, because the turnaround time of produce within our system outside of bananas is like 2 days, 48 hours. So stuff comes and just immediately leaves. So it really never sits in the warehouse and immediately gets to the retail. The retailer still has 3, 4, 5 days to sell the produce. For bananas, we do the ripening internally, and that has about a 5-day cycle.
So in less than 5 years, you've been able to raise $30 million. And can you advise other people that are trying to raise equity, but most importantly, other people that are trying to get into these sectors, and how you've been able to raise that much?
So I would say that we've been very, very fortunate. The reason why we've been very fortunate is because very early on in the history of the company, we managed to build a very, very strong team. Because one of the things that investors are investing in is just not the idea. They're investing on the ability to execute. So, and you cannot have the ability to execute if you do not have the right people on the team. Many people can have ideas, and what really differentiates companies is your ability to execute. And the ability to execute is actually driven by your investment in talent. And what you find is that many entrepreneurs, when they're building a new business, they don't think about the ability to execute. They kind of get so engrossed with the idea. And what happens is that when an investor isn't looking at a company, they're looking at, can I bank on this team to execute against this idea? Because then no investor will come and invest in you on the hope that you will then build the team that will then execute the idea. And I think that's something that we learned very, very early on. So what we did is we were fortunate enough to at least access resources in the beginning. I think as I've mentioned in some quarters, in the early stages, my wife and I, we had to sell our family home and invest in the business. And what that allowed us to do is to actually build a team very, very early on. So when the early investors came to look at the business, they not only saw my co-founder and myself, and I was not even in the business on a full-time basis, I was non-executive then, but when they looked at the two of us, they also looked at the team that we had built. And when we presented a business plan, it was believable that we were actually going to execute it. And I think that's what started to differentiate us from everyone else. And I think for us, there's been that continuous focus around how do we continue building talent that ensures that whatever it is that we set out to do, we can execute. What I would say is that the problems that we face are not insurmountable. The solutions lie within us. And I think all we need to do is figure out how we create an ecosystem that is more supportive of companies that are trying to solve this issue, because this is a $300 billion problem. Not one company is going to solve the whole problem across the continent. But how do we then create that enabling ecosystem that allows us then to start tackling this problem? There's always solutions out. And I have this quote from Paul Coelho from his book, The Alchemist, that creates a lot of inspiration in me, that if you want something badly enough, the universe will conspire to give it to you. And I think as entrepreneurs, if we want to solve these problems badly enough, then what you'll find is that we will find solutions in terms of how to tackle it. Twiga Foods is a technology-enabled platform that aggregates demand from the informal retail and organizes an efficient supply chain to meet the needs of those retailers, from sourcing fresh produce to dry goods. And we're very, very bullish on the fact that we're playing a key role in solving the issue of food security in the African continent.